Okay. Good afternoon, one and all. Welcome to another weekend talk of Creactive of episode 140. Creactive, where curiosity knows no bounds and learning never ends. Our mission to ignite minds, expand perspectives, and explore the uncharted territories of thought. As the clock strikes 3 p.m., every Saturday our virtual stage comes alive, streaming live on the Creactive GBD YouTube channel. As we prepare to unravel the mysteries of the unconventional and the extraordinary concepts. Creactive focus on non-textual, non-academic, non-syllabus related concepts. Today, we focus on the adaptive optics, unlocking sharper, brighter, and clearer imaging. To present this talk, we have Dr. Vyasa Akondi sir with us today. Uh, uh, a maestro in the field of adaptive optics, who will be our guide through this captivating journey. Without further delay, I call Afrin to introduce today's speaker, and I welcome one and all for today's session. Over to Afrin.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Afrin Taj. I'm a creative volunteer. Today, I'm going to have a brief introduction to our creative speaker. Our today's speaker name is Vyas Akondi. Is an assistant professor of physical science at the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Behrampur, since August 2022. He earned his PhD degree in physics from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore in 2012. He subsequently held postdoctoral position at University College Dublin in Ireland from 2012 to 2014 and Instituto di Optica in space from 2014 to 2018, and later served as a senior research scientist for more than 4 years at Stanford University until 2022, currently leading a research group at IISER Behrampur. Dr. Akondi is specialized in advanced adaptive optics technology. His work primarily focuses on developing cutting-edge adaptive optics ocular devices from clinical applications in ophthalmology, aiming to enable early disease diagnosis, management, and the evolution of the new therapies and vision correction strategies. Additionally, his research explores using adaptive optics in microscopy to analyze structural and functional changes in biological samples at the microscale. I welcome you, sir, for today's creative talk. And I welcome all the creative participants for today's section. Over to Supriya, ma'am.
Thank you, Afrin. Over to you, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for a very kind introduction. So, first of all, I would like to congratulate the organizers, the creative team, for doing such a great job of inviting speakers and to speak on general topics that are beyond the textbook and more not usually discussed in a classroom setting. And this helps students really understand what is beyond the textbook and what is beyond the classroom. And I congratulate you for this, and making this available to general public is really useful. And congratulations again for doing such a great job. And thank you for inviting me here. And this gives me an opportunity to discuss some science that we do here at IISER Behrampur. And before I go on to discuss about adaptive optics, let me tell you that I'm going to give you only a brief overview because I know that the audience is very broad in the sense that the age group of the audience to which this talk is intended is too broad. And so I'll keep it as simple as I can possibly be able to make it. So, and before I even go to the talk, I would like to briefly introduce you to ICERS and the ICERS system. So that will be my next slide. So ICERS are Indian Institutes of Science Education and Research. And these were set up by the Ministry of Education, Government of India. And these are autonomous institutions. And the first ones to be set up were ICER Pune in 2006, and again ICER Kolkata in 2006. And then we had ICER Mohali in 2007, and ICER Bhopal in quick succession in 2008, and again ICER Thiruvananthapuram in 2008. But it took them some time to actually establish ICER Tirupati in 2015 and ICER Barampur, where I'm currently located, again in 2016. So all these institutions are mainly focused on promoting basic science education and research, mostly fundamental research, but then also can be translational. So the goal of these institutions is to first impart science to very young minds, and then also drag them into research and promote research kind of an education into them so that they can pursue research when they go on to pursue their academic careers. And most of these institutions have been trying to do a lot of research, and most of this research is actually oriented towards an interdisciplinary approach. So if you look at physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics independently, they're all subjects on their own. But then only when you put them together, you actually can achieve some of the, or solve some problems that are more realistic and more useful to the society on a daily basis. So we actually try to have this interdisciplinary approach, not just in terms of teaching, but also in research. So there is a huge collaboration between departments and within departments, and this really helps us solve some very important problems and real-world problems. And with all of this, we, of course, want to do research, and this research has to be sustainable. So we work in collaboration with some of the science funding agencies like the DST, SCRB, and other institutions, where we try to collaborate with them, get funding from them, and try to build on what is already existing in the literature. And the goal is to advance science in a way that it actually helps people in real world. And the goal is also to be able to produce solutions that are sustainable, and so that we can continue living in a better way. So this path includes several steps, and all the way going from trying to develop advanced technologies and to see how they are actually applicable in real world, and finally to convert this solution into a company, a technology company. So all of this is the part of our research and day-to-day activities. And all of this is supported by a huge support, not just from the funding agencies, but also from the host institutes where we are located. So we have lots of advanced research facilities in all these ICERs. And the goal, again, is to establish wonderful labs. And of course, we are supported by high quality researchers coming all over the world. And these fantastic faculty are actually using these facilities. And of course, the students who are of very high quality coming to these institutions together produce wonderful results. So these are some pictures that you can see of some of the machines that we have at IISER Berhampur. So at IISER Berhampur, which is quite a new campus that is being set up, and we have a very huge academic building that is under construction and not fully completed. Some parts of the building are slowly being put to use, but then there's more work to be done. We hope that in the next couple of years will be fully functional, and most of the labs would be shifted to this academic block that you're seeing on the left side. So what we do at IISER Berhampur as in our group would do in IISER Berhampur is adaptive optics. And using this technology, we can actually look at objects at a very, very tiny scale. We can look at microscopic scale, and that too of living tissues. So this is what I'm going to talk about in the next few slides. But before we go into these fundamentals or into the research, we need to know some fundamentals of or some few basic definitions of what we do. So this, you all know that if you imagine that you're looking at a car very far away, so if you look at this car, which is very far away, then the headlights of the car are placed at a very tiny angular separation, right? So if you're looking at a car that is very far away, the angle between them, the two headlights, will be small. But as the car approaches towards you, then you'll see that the angle between the two headlights of the car is now much greater, right? So it's easy to distinguish. And if the car is very far away, it's really hard for you to distinguish. And of course, at some point when the car is super far away, it's almost impossible for you to identify if it's a car or a motorbike. So the minimum angular separation that your eye can actually distinguish is given by the angular resolution. And this angular separation that can actually distinguish, the minimum angle that can distinguish, is called the angular resolution. And we talked about the eye trying to resolve two objects, right? So you have two headlights, and you're trying to distinguish between whether it's one light or two lights, right? And that is given by the eye's angular resolution. So what is limiting your eye's angular resolution? What is stopping you from seeing even objects which are super far away, right? So that is what we are trying to see here. And that effect that we cannot see if the objects are very far away as two separate objects, but one single object, is because of diffraction. And this is because of diffraction of light. And if you look at the basic definition of diffraction in your textbooks, you would see something like diffraction is bending of light rays at the edges. So if you have an edge, then you'll see that the light will actually bend at the edges. And because of this, you will not see a single point object, but rather you will see a spread of the image of the object. So what is happening here is that the resolution or the angle, the minimum angle that separates the two objects, is given by this relationship here. And in the numerator, you have lambda, which is called the wavelength of light or the color of light. Lambda is a parameter that distinguishes different colors of light. And D, capital D, is given by the aperture, like how big is the entrance pupil of the optical system. And theta, or which is the Latin letter that you see on the left-hand side of this expression, it's called theta. And this theta gives you the angular resolution. And so we talked about theta being proportional to lambda. So as theta increases, lambda increases. So this means that as the wavelength increases, the angular resolution increases, right? So, sorry, the theta increases. If theta increases, that means that the angular resolution decreases. So as you can see here, red light has greater wavelength than the blue light. So if you use red light, then because theta is proportional to lambda, the red light, you'll see that the angular resolution will be, theta will be greater. So the angular resolution will be smaller. Because smaller the angle, the better it is. Because you'll be able to distinguish, right? If the angle is smaller, if the minimum angle that you can see as the separation between two objects is smaller, the better you can see, you can distinguish. So you want a smaller theta, which is better imaging. But in this case, you can see that as the wavelength increases, you will not be able to resolve two objects which are close by very well. So clearly theta is proportional to lambda. This can be done through experiments too. You can do experiments to actually check this. And also if you have aperture, it is also aperture dependent, right? If you have a smaller aperture, then the diffraction at the edges will be greater. And if you have a bigger aperture, then the diffraction at the edges will be smaller. It's inversely proportional. If you see this here, theta is inversely proportional to d. That means that as d increases, theta reduces. So this is exactly what is happening. For a 6 millimeter pupil, d is large. So what happens to theta? Theta becomes small. So that means you'll be able to resolve objects which are very nearby. All right. And how can our eye's angular resolution be improved? So there are two things that you can do. One, of course, is to look at a different wavelength of light, right? So if you want to improve your angular resolution or reduce theta, one thing you can do is to look at blue light rather than red light. Or you have to increase your aperture, which is D. What is the aperture of your eye? It is the pupil of the eye. So the only way you can improve your resolution or the eye's angular resolution is by increasing the pupil size. So the normal pupils have a typical size of about 2 millimeters to 5 millimeters during daytime for a healthy human eye. And the only way to improve or increase is by either being in the dark, where the pupils naturally dilate, or use eye drops, which can dilate the pupil of the eye. So when the pupil dilates, then you'll be able to see or resolve objects slightly more better than if it was not dilated. All right. So this is the anatomy of the eye. It's pretty simple and straightforward. You must have studied, or some of you must have looked at this before. So if you look at it, there is the crystalline lens of the eye, which is this one, which is the huge lens that is sitting right in front, behind the pupil. So the black oval is the pupil of the eye. So this is the one that either expands or contracts when you dilate the pupil. And you have the crystalline lens, which is the focusing element of the eye. And then you have the retina, which is this layer here. And at the retina, the images are formed. So you have an object here, and the light, I mean, this object is illuminated, of course, and then the light from the object reaches through the pupil, it reaches your retina and forms images on the retina, and you're able to see. So there is a fantastic property for this crystalline lens that this can actually change its shape. So that is how we are actually able to see in focus both far objects and near objects. So if you were to look at far objects, then this lens would be much thinner, and so your focal length would be different, and you'll be able to see far objects. And then when you look at nearby objects, For example, when you're reading a book or when you're looking at a computer, then this lens would be bulged and it would contract. And this would allow a shorter focal length, and you'll be able to see objects that are nearby. And this is a typical imaging. That's how imaging happens through the eye. So why we are interested in looking at all of this? Because we are talking about diffraction and angular resolution, right? So when light passes through the pupil and reaches the retina, there is imaging happening. You form an image of the object. And this is again limited by diffraction, because around the pupil edges, there is diffraction that is happening. And of course, if the object is very far away, it's indistinguishable, and you'll see the two objects as one object, although actually there are two objects in that case. Now, what happens if the aperture size increases or the angular resolution improves? As the angular resolution improves, you'll see that the imaging also has improved. And this is only happening with an increasing pupil diameter. If the diameter of your pupil of the eye increases, then you'll be able to slowly resolve the objects. So as you go from left to right, you'll see that the one single image which you saw earlier is now two. Actually, that is how you increase the angular resolution, by increasing the pupil diameter. Now, let's say you want to look at stars, which is now not a very regular practice, but if you look at the stars, then you want to look through the naked eye, and if you just lie down on your terrace, look at the stars, then you would see a lot of things, right? You will see different colors of stars, you would see twinkling of the stars. But is there a better way to look at stars other than our naked eye? Of course there is. There is the telescope. But again, the telescope is limited by the angular resolution that we just discussed. And if you look through a telescope, if you try to look at a star, lots of funny things happen. And one of the first things that happens is that the image of the star is not stable. It continuously appears to move from one location to another on the camera, although the star is actually not moving. I mean, it may be moving because of the terrestrial movement, but within a short span of time, it should not move as much. And this funny, rapid, random movements of the star image was initially perplexing to the scientists, and they were wondering what was actually happening and why this is so. And the reason why this happens is because of atmospheric turbulence, and this turbulence will not allow the camera in a telescope to capture the image of the star and stabilize it. So you need to somehow correct for this turbulence to be able to capture the image of the star at a very high resolution. So this is how an observatory image would look like. On the left-hand side, what you see is a long exposure image of a bright star in the sky. And you can see that after an exposure of a very long time, you'll see that the final image of the star is not like a bright spot, but it's like a huge blurred image. But if you take a short exposure image, multiple short exposure images, and stitch them all together in one single image, then you will see all these tiny dots. See, all these tiny dots are there. And then if you put all of them together, it will be like, again, this blurred object that you see. So what is happening here is that this turbulence is continuously moving your star image from one location to another. But a diffraction limited image, meaning the image that is only limited by the size of the telescope, is perfect diffraction image, as you have seen earlier. Okay. Right there. So the one that you see here, this is a perfect diffraction image of a telescope. But what you see is slightly more different. The one that you see on the right-hand side, it is not really purely diffraction limited, but very close to the diffraction limited image of the telescope, of the star. Now, why is this important? It's important because sometimes when we try to image objects in the sky with a telescope, you want to see at a very high resolution because you want to distinguish between two objects which are very close by. For example, this binary star, you have a binary star, you have two stars that are going around each other and due to gravity. And you see here that if atmospheric turbulence is present, then the image of the star, of this binary star, will be so blurred. But if you correct for this blur, then you would see a beautiful binary star. Okay, so let's go all the way back to Isaac Newton. He was the first one who actually tried to identify the problem. So he said that if the theory of making telescopes could at length be fully brought to practice, which means that at that time, the telescopes were not very popular and they were just about starting to become popular because of developments in the technology of making optics, lenses. And so he said, yet there would be certain bounds beyond which telescopes could not perform. So even if you build a perfect telescope, even then you'll not be able to see imaging of stars very nicely. And this is because the air through which we look upon the stars is in a perpetual tremor, as may be seen by the tremulous motion of shadows cast by high towers and by the twinkling of fixed stars. I don't know if you have observed nice, beautiful shadows of high towers on a hot, sunny day, then you would see that the shadow of these towers actually at the edge, they would actually move. And this is because there is kind of turbulence from the top of the tower until where the shadow was cast, right? So between these two, there is a huge turbulence that is happening. And this turbulence happens because of there is hot air, cold air, and mix up of particles of different temperature. So that causes a final image that is not very sharp. So you don't see a sharp shadow of the tower. And the same thing happens with stars. So at night, when you try to take images of stars using telescope, you again have problem, right? And when you look at stars with your naked eye, you see that the stars are twinkling. And this is because of, again, the atmospheric turbulence. And he suggested, of course, a remedy. And he suggested that we go on top of highest mountains so that we can avoid the clouds and the atmosphere, hopefully. And this is actually what we do in practice nowadays when we build ground-based telescopes. Whenever we have these ground-based telescopes, they are typically made or built in locations where the seeing is very high, very, very good. That means there is less turbulence in the atmosphere at that location. And of course, we can go much beyond that. So there is this space mission to build space telescopes. And one of the most successful space telescope was the Hubble Space Telescope. And now we, of course, have the Webb Space Telescopes, which is more than a 6-meter telescope. So it gives very beautiful images of the celestial sky and all through day and night. So it's a beautiful instrument to have. And you have some of the sample images from there, the Crab Nebula, you can see how nice it is. And another way to overcome is just by using a better optical design, right? One, of course, Newton suggested that you go above the clouds, but there is another way of doing it, and simpler way of doing it is to come up with better optical designs. And in the case of microscopy, this is what people did. People built very good optical instruments. So one of the finest optics instruments were done with a very careful optical design and manufacturing units. So if you look at the left-hand side, it's an extremely tiny microscope, and the microscope sample is placed on the tip of the needle that you see. And this is the optics lens, and then the tip is right there. So you can see the shadow of the tip casted there. So the microscopy sample would be standing on the tip, and you see through to actually look at the higher resolution image of the sample. And then you have Robert Hooke's microscope. These are very, very old designs, optical designs, yet very effective at that time. And then we had in 1953, Babcock proposing a method for correcting for these aberrations or the turbulence effects due to the atmosphere, and he called it adaptive optics. And the technique was simply to use an oil film and move the oil film around to create changes in refractive index, which causes a correction to the turbulence that we encounter. And a modern adaptive optics system looks much like this. In simple terms, I would like to keep it as simple as I can. So we have a distorted wavefront. So this is, imagine that this is like the turbulence that you see through the atmosphere. And these are the net effect of passing through the entire column of the atmospheric turbulence. And then it hits a wavefront corrector, and this wavefront corrector is trying to correct for these distortions or compensate for these distortions that are arriving at it. And then you have a beam splitter, which deflects some part of the light, a small fraction of the light, to the wavefront sensor. And this sensor, what is doing is simply trying to detect the shape of this wavefront that is coming in. Plus, of course, whatever is there on the wavefront corrector too. And then control system is trying to take information from the wavefront sensor and give it to the wavefront corrector so that this distortion can be completely compensated. And what goes through the beam splitter is a nearly flat wavefront. So you have a very nice, beautiful image of the science object in your camera. So this is a very simplified view of the entire adaptive optics system, but things can be much more complicated when you look at astronomical applications and other applications of adaptive optics. But let's look at some nice, fantastic images captured by different telescopes across the globe. So there is this nice image of Neptune captured by ESO, European Southern Observatory. Without adaptive optics, you can see that the image of Neptune is very blurred. And here you can actually see many more features. And this is the image of galaxy. You can see without and with adaptive optics, things are very different. And again, star cluster image, you can see that without adaptive optics, you don't really see that there are many stars here. But here you can see that there are several stars. And it's pretty clear from this image. And this is only possible because of adaptive optics. And this also helps not just in imaging, but also in distinguishing one object from the other, and in spectroscopy, and many other things can be done after you do adaptive optics. So the same technology which was applied in astronomy in the beginning was also adapted into microscopy. And this was important because it has several medical applications. And so the first attempts were done by John O'Brien and Carol Coxwell. So this was done way back in 1992. And you can see that they adopted a very similar schematic, but it is slightly different in the sense that you have a deformed mirror and you have an array of custom sensor array. This is called the Shock-Hartman waveform sensor, and the deformed mirror, which is correcting for these aberrations. And If you remember, we had seen a very sharp diffraction limited image of the object, but they obtained this after correction. And they were still happy with this correction because it was better than what they had earlier. So this is a huge advancement at that point of time. So this is what you expected, what you see on the left, but what you got is what is on the right side. But still, it is quite decent progress at that time in 1992. But of course, now the technology has grown quite a lot, and some of the latest images give wonderful insights into various biological systems. And you can see how clearly imaging can be done with adaptive optics. As you can see, the images are much more sharper, much more brighter, and much more clear. So you can see in all these images that were obtained with adaptive optics are clearer than without adaptive optics. Like this one again with adaptive optics, this one without adaptive optics. So why do we need adaptive optics in ophthalmology in the first place, right? So we said, okay, if you're trying to look at a microscope sample, you will have aberrations due to the sample itself. But what about the eye? I have a perfect eye. Why do I need to use adaptive optics in ophthalmology, right? So I can see objects very clearly. So even if you have a normal human eye, you still need adaptive optics to be able to image the retina. So why do we need to image the retina? That will come very soon. But when we are trying to image the retina, we need to use, again, adaptive optics. And that's because although we think that we have a perfect eye because we can see objects very clearly, we actually do not have a perfect eye. What we have is an aberrated eye. We have a cornea on which is the front surface of the eye, and you have two surfaces of the cornea, the front surface and the back surface, and then you have the crystalline lens, which is again having two surfaces, the front and the back. So we call it anterior and posterior. And these four surfaces together give a lot of aberrations, and each eye is different. And your left eye is different from the right eye. So all these cause aberrations. And when you try to image the retina by shining light into the eye, we don't care about the light going into the eye. In the imaging of the retina, we care about the light that is coming back from the eye. So we care about the light that is backscattered at the retina. So imagine that you have light being backscattered at the retina right here, and then it is coming out, but it has to go through the optics of the eye, the crystalline lens of the eye, and the cornea of the eye. So when it passes through these surfaces, then again it gets distorted, and the final image that you see is now less intense. You can see that it is less intense and it is broader. So again, we'll have aberrations, and we need to correct for these distortions. So we have an adaptive optics system which looks very similar to what we have seen for astronomy. The only difference is that now you have the eye. And when you're trying to image the human retina, we would like to capture a scan of the retina, a small portion of the retina, like a small box inside your eye. And how do we do that? So what we do is we do scanning, optical scanning. So what we do is we shine light at one single point of the retina, and then this point is moved in subsequent steps. So we start with some point, and then we keep going right side, and we stop at a certain point, and then we go a little bit down. So you need two scanners, one to go horizontally, and then you need one more scanner to go vertically. So we have two scanners, and these two scanners create what is called a 2D raster scan image of the retina. And your science camera is continuously collecting all these images that you collect from this 2D raster scan, and you finally have a nice, beautiful image of the retina. But all the while, you're having distortions, because these distortions are varying, because at different locations of the retina, you are capturing light, right? And every time it passes through, again, the crystalline lens of the eye and the cornea of the eye. So again, you have distortions. So we correct for them continuously. And why do we actually need to image the retina? So there is a huge burden, global eye disease burden. And of course, the majority of it is coming from cataract, which is the most successful surgery that we have for human body is the cataract surgery. And it's pretty good. And this is completely and easy to correct for. But of course, there are other challenges associated with cataract, which we'll not talk today. But there is uncorrected refractive error, which is about 20%. And we will not talk about these two, but there is a huge irreversible blindness. That means that these diseases, if we do not cure them or we do not address them in time, then these patients can become totally blind. So you have age-related macular degeneration, which is AMD, then diabetic retinopathy, and glaucoma. So all these diseases are blindness-causing diseases, and if we do not address them right in time. So what we need is a device that can try to correct or try to address this issue very early. And to address this very early, it's important to diagnose the disease very early. So how do I detect the disease very early? So that is a challenge that we have. And with adaptive optics, we can try to achieve this. So if you go to an ophthalmologist, these are some of the instruments that you typically look at. So one is, of course, a slit lamp, which is a very simple instrument where the doctor will examine your eye through the equipment. And you have direct ophthalmoscopy, which is a handheld instrument. And then you have autorefractor, which tries to correct measure aberrations. And then you have a cinoptophore, which is again another instrument to check the quality of the eye. And all these retina, these are basic instruments. But then you have more advanced instruments like the fundus camera, which looks at the image of the retina in one single shot. So it's a wide field of view imaging where the entire retina is illuminated in one shot, and you capture the image of the retina using a single camera in a single shot. But then you have OCT, which is optical coherence tomography. And this technique is also beautiful because it has a nice axial resolution that you can separate different layers of the eye, but it doesn't have the lateral resolution, meaning you cannot take a beautiful 2D image of a single layer with a very high resolution, which the adaptive optics technique can give you. So the adaptive optics technique, which is still restricted to clinical research labs situated very close to hospitals in the US and Europe mostly. And this can, eliminate or detect very early some of these diseases that we discussed: diabetic retinopathy, AMD, and glaucoma. So these are some of the first images that were captured with adaptive optics in ophthalmoscopy. In 1997, you can see on the right-hand side in image B, you can see with adaptive optics, the image is better than in the image on the left side, which is A. And you can see that there are these tiny features that you start to see. And these are actually cones of the retina. And later on, there was also work done to identify what type of cone this is. Is it a S cone, M cone, or L cones? And these are cones of different properties which can identify different colors. And this can be done through, again, experiments, which I'm not going to discuss in detail. And a conventional ophthalmoscope, what you can see on the left side is something like this. So you can see an image of, the blood vessels can be seen, but they're too dim, right? Too blurred. But with an adaptive optics system, you can see a much higher resolution image of the retina, and you can start to see cones which are quite big. And then you can see also rods here. And these are images taken by from the Dubra lab at Stanford. And you can see that the transverse resolution of conventional and adaptive optics scanning light of thermoscope. So you can see a 10 times or close to 20 times sometimes an improvement in resolution. But of course, the field of view is now much smaller because in a conventional fundus of thermoscopy, you have a huge angle and you can see the entire retina in one shot or maybe a couple of shots. But when you look at the retina in much higher detail, the field of view is much more smaller now, but then you can see many more features of the retina, which can help us detect some of these diseases that we just talked about. So this is a very high resolution image of the retina that you see on the right-hand side, where you can see cones as if it's like a lattice, some kind of a lattice. And you can see confocal imaging as well. So we use what is called confocal imaging, where we try to restrict the amount of light that we collect by using a pinhole, and all the light that goes through the pinhole is collected. And this helps in axial cross-sectioning of the retina. So that means that we can collect images of individual layers of the retina. So here you can see that if you use light that is not going through the pinhole or the tiny hole, but if you collect light coming that is not going through the hole and somehow do some mathematical combinations, then you get a slightly better resolution or contrast. And you can see more the structures more apparently, as you can see here. But as I said, the clinical translation of adaptive optics is still pending, and there are lots of challenges. There are lots of things to discover, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but some of the very big challenges that we have are to look at transparent structures, and then also to improve the field of view that we just discussed, and then to align the instrument, to maintain the instrument takes a lot of time. And this is a big challenge in a clinical setting because a clinician would not want to come in before time and spend 1 hour aligning the entire instrument. So this is a big challenge that we have currently. So we are trying to standardize all these alignment steps, and we try to come up with easier approaches to make this instrument more easily usable in a clinical setting. And of course, again, after you take the images, all these images have to be processed because these are videos actually we collect, and these have to be registered against one another so that you get very nice, beautiful images that a doctor can see and diagnose. All right, so at IISER Berhampur, we are trying to work on some of the research areas on wavefront sensing, ophthalmic imaging, visual optics, adaptive optics, and microscopy. So what I touched upon is just the basics or fundamentals of adaptive optics, but using these tools, you can do a lot more things than what I just discussed. And I would like to thank the funding agencies. So we have funding from CERB and also from IISER Berhampur. And thank you again, the organizers, for giving me this wonderful opportunity, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Srinath sir, you can unmute.
Yes, it was a very good introductory talk on adaptive optics. Just 2 questions. Question 1, you mentioned about Hubble Space Telescope. In that time scale, whether adaptive optics was developed at that time because they had a small, what you call service mission to change the optic system of the Hubble Space Telescope. One is that. Second question is, with respect to India, what is the opportunities or chances in this field? Like many new areas are coming in particularly in India. What is this, your opinion? Thank you. Hope my question is good.
Hey, can you hear me now? Um,
Yes, sir.
yeah. So thank you for those two questions. No, of course, the Hubble Space Telescope does not use adaptive optics because it doesn't require. Because honestly speaking, because it's in space, right? So there are no turbulence effects like we have in a ground-based telescope. But then it does, I think, involve some compensating element, which is maybe a tilted mirror or a mirror that can quickly correct for the positioning of the image. But I'm not sure about that, but very likely it has, but definitely not adaptive optics. And coming to your second question, opportunities for so India has recently built a telescope headed by Ares Nainital, I think, and they have a nice optical telescope. And there is a lot of scope actually to implement adaptive optics on telescopes in India, because we have lots of these ground-based telescopes. And if there is funding available, then there's a very good chance that some of these telescopes can be revisited, and maybe adaptive optic systems can be installed on these telescopes so that the imaging can be definitely improved. And in terms of other applications, I for sure know that there are some other groups, some groups in DRDO, some groups in BARC. They're working on, again, adaptive optic systems and tools that can help in defense applications. And I'm not too much aware of what they're developing, but they're trying to probably develop tools that will help them look at a tanker that is very far away. And again, free space communication, right? So you're trying to look through the turbulence of the atmosphere. So again, there is some scope there. And coming to research in ophthalmoscopy, again, there's a lot of scope here, and also in microscopy, because in India, there are not many groups really working on these topics. But if you look at US, Europe, and even some of these Asian countries which are very fast developing, like China, you have lots of these groups working on microscopy and ophthalmoscopy imaging tools, and they're trying to develop adaptive optic systems on those tools, and they're progressing very fast. So there's a lot of scope to develop those in India. And of course, there's not a single hospital in India that can boast of an adaptive optic system. So there's a huge scope, and there are some hospitals which tried and failed. And so, and in fact, the unfortunate situation is that they don't even want to try. So there's a lot of scope for youngsters to push and learn and try to build systems for them and encourage them to use. And this will really improve not aging, but also help us to develop new therapies. Like, for example, if you want to test a new therapy for improving vision by, for example, correcting for or curing diseases like diabetic retinopathy or any of these, then you want to see minor changes that occur at the retina. For example, there's neovascularization and the blood vessel is are growing very fast, or you want to see what is going on in the eye at this tiny scale, right? So if you want to test new therapies, you want these instruments to be in place. Otherwise, you'll not be able to test whatever you have developed. So this instrument, in fact, can be also used not just on humans, but also on animals. because when you first test your therapies, you are actually testing on animals, on mice, on rats, um, yeah, on
Thank you.
primates. Yeah.
Venkat,
Hello?
yes, Venkat,
Yeah,
go ahead.
am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your presentation. It was also really great. In terms of space, getting to the question, how, say, adding adaptive optics into a space telescope would help? Because from what I have heard here, it really doesn't have much effect on in space. There's no turbulence, it's just a vacuum. And the only thing that majorly affects anything is light. So how would, say, adding such a adaptive optics help improve a space telescope?
Yeah, that's your question.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I more or less answered this question earlier. So what I was telling was that if you send the telescope to space, then of course there is no atmosphere, right? No atmospheric turbulence.
right.
So of course you don't need you don't have this blurring effect, right?
But there might be, say, something like extra light or anything that can disrupt an image, like excessive sunlight that is blocking or that is creating a obstructive view towards our object or target.
Okay, so of course, if you look at the James Webb Space Telescopes, then you have a shield which actually tries to protect from warming, right? Because the sun is continuously warming it, right? So there is this sun shield which is continuously trying to stop radiation going and hitting the telescopes, which can actually spoil the telescope. So if you look at the mirror, the mirror will get heated up, and that's bad for the telescope. So you have, I think, quite a few layers of sun shield which can protect the telescope. But there is no need of adaptive optics because you want the telescope to be light as possible, right? Because you're sending something into space, and to send something into space, you need a huge amount of fuel, right? And you need to put that in the right orbit, and so you need to reduce the weight that you're going to put in. So you have to minimize the amount of weight that you can put in.
That
So
is
there can be some correcting element which is more controllable and very simple, but you don't need a very sophisticated adaptive optics system that we just discussed here.
Yeah, no,
But for a ground-based telescope, you definitely need an
that is
adaptive optics system.
because there's fog, turbulence, many effects from Mother Nature.
Right.
No, I meant by in space, even though we would need light, I'm talking more as any excessive light.
You're talking about what do you mean by excessive light? Where does it come from?
Basically, anywhere, for example, the sun.
Yeah, the sun, we have the shield, right? We have a sun shield which protects the telescope from
Disrupt the
getting
image.
heated up. No, it wouldn't, because the cameras are never focused or looking at the sun.
Right, okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah. But of course, you can have other sources. For example, you can have an object that you're trying to look at in the sky, and there may be another object which is very close by. And of course, you cannot avoid it.
That is
So I see some more hands raised.
Srikantan sir.
Alan,
I have some chat too. I cannot hear you.
Sir, you
Now, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you, sir. Excellent. This thing, right from fundamentals, you started. In fact, I was going back to my. I'm actually a retired professor. I was going back to my classes where I was teaching diffraction, limit of resolution, resolving power, and things like that. Yeah. And now, I got three questions, sir.
Yeah.
One is just to test my understanding. In the wavefront corrector, when you showed that wavefront corrector, where you feed the part of the wavefront from the this thing, through the control system to back to the wavefront corrector.
Right.
There you mean to say that we feed it in the anti-phase to make corrections there? I mean, this you go to the wave corrector.
You're absolutely right.
Just my understanding.
Yeah.
See, you have a control system. A part is now fed back through the
Correct.
control system to the wavefront. Correct, right?
Right.
There you set the signal in anti-phase, right? Anti-phase, so that you make the correction.
Correct. So what is happening here is the part of the wavefront that is arriving late, right?
Yeah.
Will be corrected for when it arrives at the wavefront corrector. So it has to be of opposite phase.
Yeah, that's what I was going to. Okay.
That's
it. So second thing is, you are talking about that retinopathy, retinopathy. Actually, you are talking about retinopathy, no? Can you hear me now?
It's not retinopathy. It's actually retinal imaging.
No. You mentioned about the disease, retinopathy.
Diabetic retinopathy, yeah.
Yeah. See, now, diabetic only. It's actually the retina, a small part of the retina, if it gets damaged due to some reason. Okay. Then it fails to form an image there, and you see the dark space, something like that in the field of view, right?
Correct.
That's right. Okay. But now the most of these eye doctors say that it is almost incurable. I think it's going to be permanent and all that. But you are mentioning that there is way of, there people are there now to correct it and let's say find a remedy for all that. Is it, have they come across any such cases and where they have really corrected that?
Yeah, let me try to clarify this. So of course, some of these diseases are going into blindness because if you look at these three diseases that I talked about, AMD, diabetic retinopathy, and glaucoma, the unfortunate situation is that the onset of the disease is very rapid, meaning, for example, glaucoma, there are no symptoms of glaucoma until it almost makes you blind, right? So there is not much time between diagnosis and going into blindness. So you have to be very careful, and that is why we need to actually, like how you go to a dentist regularly, right? So you need to go to an ophthalmologist also regularly and maybe get a eye exam, very high resolution imaging once in a while, so that we at least know the quality of your retina. And let us say it is getting bad and then you are losing some of the cones or rods, then you may want to get treatment early, right? And some of these diseases, if identified early, you can sometimes avoid it by making some changes in your, for example, the way you live, the way you eat, the way, for example, AMD, you said, please don't smoke, right? And diabetic retinopathy, you can change your diet habits and change the way things are, right? And there are, in fact, there are some cures for diseases. Wet AMD and dry AMD are slightly different from each other, but AMD has certain cures if identified early. But again, if you can identify early, you will go into blindness. So that's a risk. So what adaptive optics is actually giving you hope that if identified early, then there is.
If it's in the early stages, one can
exactly. And in fact, the biggest challenge to develop new therapies is because you cannot identify the changes. So let's say I take a mouse and I found a new drug and I inject this drug to the mouse. How do I know that it is getting cured, right? How do I know that if there is progress or improvement? And that only happens if you look through the adaptive optics system. In fact, some of the hospitals in the US, they're actually doing this. They're using the instrument to develop new therapies and test new therapies. And based on the results, they modify their drug a bit more, and then they come back again, test, this cycle keeps going on. So we need these instruments to actually even develop therapies. Forget about curing it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. The third one is, the third question is, this is regarding, this is some of my, some good students, they keep asking me, sir, what to do after, how can I'm interested in research and things like that. So I to suggest, to your organization, like IISER, okay?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
Now, I want to suggest to some good students, who are really interested in science and want to take up science as their career.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. Just may I know what's the courses you're having and what's the procedure? Just in a few seconds, can you tell me?
So there is this IAT, which is the IISER aptitude test. So
okay.
Can you see this on my screen?
Yeah, I can hear. Pardon me?
Can you see it on my screen? So this is
I'm able to.
So this is the website for admission to IISER program, and it's called IISER admission.in. Right now this is open actually. Right now this is open.
I see.
And students who are eligible just finish their +2. They can apply for this, and there is this exam which you have to sit for. I think it's about 200 marks or something like that, 240 marks or something like that. So it includes physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics, all 4 subjects. So even if you are not very good at math, or even if you're not very good at biology, you can still attempt and you can score sufficient marks to get into IISER, I would say. So once this, I think this time we have about 2,000 seats in all these IISERs put together. So anyone can apply for this exam, write the exam, and then get into IISERs.
And you have got both graduate and post-graduation, then research, right? Same
correct.
3 levels.
So we have this 5-year BSMS program. And then we have a 4-year bachelor's program. And then we also have master's program, which is coming up very soon. Right now it is not there, but very soon master's program also will come up. And then we have integrated PhD program where the student, after their bachelor's, they can come to master's and PhD, continue for PhD.
Nice.
And then we also have a dedicated PhD program.
So good. And you can do it in any of these subjects: physics, chemistry, maths, and biology.
Yeah. Physics, chemistry, math, biology. Now even we have computer science.
As you said in the beginning, multidisciplinary.
Right. In in BSMS in Bhopal, I think they have engineering sciences also. So you can have a look.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your inputs. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shobha ma'am.
Hello, sir. Thank you very much for very informative session, sir. Thank you. Sir, I have a question. Maybe this question is out of the topic. You have shown the eye anatomy and the formation of image. And in your talk, you said that the mathematical calculation will be done to get the perfect image and all those things. And sir, nowadays we have seen many, cataract operations is quite common after 40 plus. And I heard, of what the ophthalmologist said, that the fluid, which is in the form of lens, will be replaced again with the form of lens only. And without lens, they can, find a comfortable life. While driving and all, they need not wear spectacles and all. Sir, is there any other your findings and your innovations?
Thank you for the question. So in fact, when I spent time at Spain as a postdoc, I was working on problems related to cataract. So in a cataract surgery, what happens is you have this crystalline lens, which we talked about earlier. So you have this, I don't know if I passed it. I think it's behind. So you replace the crystalline lens of the eye with an artificial lens, which is an intraocular lens. It's right there. No, I think I passed it. Anyway. So you replace the crystalline lens of the eye, you remove the entire tissue because it has a nice, beautiful clouding and you cannot see it, you go almost blind. So you remove all this bad tissue and then you replace this with an artificial intraocular lens. And because this crystalline lens of the eye, like I described earlier, will allow us to see both far objects and near objects, right? So you'll be able to see far objects when your eye is relaxed. And when you try to look at near objects, your eye contracts, I mean the lens contracts, and then you'll be able to see near objects. But this property will not be there once the crystalline lens has been removed, right? You have a fixed focal length lens, right? You have a lens that is artificially made, and this has a single focal length. So this lens will be able to, you'll be able to see only a single distance. You will not be able to see all distances. So when you're trying to see, I mean, these lenses are typically made for long distances, I mean, far distances. For example, if a person is entering the room, you'll be able to see that person. So it is for this purpose. So mostly for far distance viewing. And it's a fixed focal length. And that's the reason why doctors sometimes suggest to look for what is called a multifocal intraocular lens. So these lenses, which are again artificially made, will have more than one focus, not only one that can allow you to see far distance, but also another focus which allows you to see also near distances. And the issue with these lenses is that imagine the vision with a crystalline lens, with your natural lens. So when you're seeing near objects, right, when you're focused, when you have focused your vision on near objects, then the rest of the background, or a chair in the background, a person standing in the background, or a tree in the background, will all be blurred, right? And you'll be able to see the near object very clearly. But in the case of a multifocal intraocular lens, that's not the case. The far object and the near object both will be simultaneously in focus. So you'll be able to see a sharp image of the background and also a sharp image of the object that is nearby. So this creates confusion in the human mind. So initially, the patients complain of not being able to distinguish, but then the beauty is that our neural network slowly adapts to this new vision, and you'll be able to distinguish between far objects and near objects eventually. But this will take some training and some practice and exercises, which the doctors will suggest. But another challenge is that these lenses come in different types, in varieties. Like one can be a refractive, segmented intraocular lens. The other can be diffractive lenses. Then you can also have aspheric lenses, which can have a smooth transition from far focus to near focus. So that means you'll be able to see all four simultaneously. So there are lots of challenges with these different types of lenses, and that's why we have many of them. And so one of them is that you start to see hazy structures over point objects. For example, you're driving at night, then if there's a car or a motorbike coming right in front of you, then you'll start to see halos around these headlights. So which is a challenge on its own when you're driving. So from my experience, it's really hard to say whether patients are really satisfied or not. Again, research can tell, but it's still not very popular, honestly. So there is some more work that needs to be done to make them more robust and more accurate. And some patients come back with complaints and many don't. So there are some intraocular lenses which are pretty popular. Multifocal intraocular lenses which are popular. So it again depends on you and your surgeon discussing privately on which lens is perfect for you. So you have to make a very careful choice and see which of them is the most popular, which of them is most used by successfully used by surgeons. And this you can easily find from literature. So if you go to Google Scholar, search for the type of lens that you're being implanted, then you can actually get results of what we call success percentage. So they will tell you, okay, 90% of the patients are satisfied with this intraocular lens, but 10%, and those 10%, the surgeons struggle to manage them. They come for multiple rounds of counseling and then maybe consultation, and the doctors need to tell them, oh, you need to change that, you need to change the way you do things. And so it's a different story altogether. It's a long story.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, one
Yeah.
more question, if there is a time from the organizer.
Ma'am, finish it, ma'am.
Okay, so, sir, I have heard of this blind eye, and blind eye normally it can happen to only one eye, and the other eye will be normal because of the child, which it habitually develop that kind of habit that they will use only one eye to see, and the other eye will be blind. And this we have come across, and I've seen many in my relatives, and they are undergoing laser operation and all. Sir, is there any contribution from your finding for such a kind of event, sir, that one eye will have a like a very bulged glass, and the other eye will be glass will be very flat? For this, your findings, does it contribute for the remedy for?
Honestly, I've not directly worked on this
Okay.
problem. So there is this, I don't know if it is partial blindness, but for sure, because one of the eye doesn't work at all, and only one eye can work, so it's mono vision.
Right.
Then of course there will be lots of challenges with this, but I have not really myself worked on it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
but
you.
of course,
Thank you so much, sir. Yes.
yeah.
Okay. I think we can wind up here. Vyasa sir, thank you very much for invaluable contribution to our event, for making this event more memorable and enlightening experience for all of us. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, one and
Thank
all,
you.
for joining
Thank you.
us.